please welcome him with a round of applause? Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Your Grace, Primates, Your Grace, the Dean, Chruch of Nigeria, to the Archbishops here present, my lords the bishops, and to the media team. Good evening. I feel a great sense of humility standing before the Chruch of Nigeria. Your Grace, with your kind permission, before I proceed any further, let me tell this short story. I was on my own. In St. Matthew's Church, Maitama, Abuja. And the local organizing committee for organizing the 5th convention of the Christian Men's Fellowship for the Diocese of Abuja was constituted. Coincidentally, I was included. And one of those days we were having a meeting of the LOC. And we said, what is this one important national issue that we should address in this convention? And it was agreed that we should look at the issue of food security. So we agreed the topic. And there and then, the president of the Christian Men's Fellowship said, look, for this topic, he is going to invite the president of the African Development Bank, Dr. Akinwumi Additional, to come and make the presentation. In that meeting there and then, somebody told him, say, Ken, can handle this presentation. He said, no, I want to go and invite the president of the Development Bank. So he went. And by the time they got there, they told him to bring that man. You have to bring him with a private jet. So when he heard that, he came back and we asked him, say, how far? He said, that's Enugu. He said, no. Then again, they told him, Ken can handle this topic. He said he wants to go to Federal Ministry of Agric and get somebody. That was how he went. He could not get, and finally, he came back and said, Ken, you can handle this topic. You can go ahead and handle the topic.
Where you were in your phone?
I was still on my phone. Behold, on June 6th, I made the presentation on adopting a public-private partnership model for Nigeria's food security agenda. And it was unanimously agreed at that convention that this matter must be taken to the national level. On June 8th, I was on my own again. After service, the chaplain and the team of the men, they said, look, this is your presentation. You have to follow us. We'll go and see the primates. That was how we went to the primate. Well, we all went. And I sat down and the chaplain spoke. Thereafter, I said, okay, Ken, it's your turn, speak. And the presentation I made for 45 minutes, I spoke for just 5 minutes about it. And behold, the primate said, this is what we are already considering. Thinking of how to get involved. You will have to follow us and come to Abuja. Here I am. Before the Chruch of Nigeria. I thank God for this opportunity. And I here express most sincerely my gratitude for this opportunity to be present before the Chruch of Nigeria to make this presentation titled Adopting a Public-Private Partnership in Nigeria's Quest for Food Security. Chruch of Nigeria, Awalokan. Your Grace, Awalokan is a Yoruba expression for "it is our turn." And in making this presentation, the thought is that this will not be a case of we make presentation and we say government go and do. No, we will be the ones to partake, to do it. And I will make this presentation with just about 10 slides. I will look at the definition of terms. I will look at biblical perspectives of food security. I will consider our past experiences of planning for food security. Look at the Jonathan government. I will consider the Buhari government, and then I will look at what is happening now under the Tinubu government. Thereafter, we will look at a new model for food security in Nigeria. I will consider some specific rules, both for President Tinubu and how that will relate with our primates. We'll then look at how to go about it, where to start, what next to do, and then we will conclude. By way of starting out, I'll start by defining public-private partnership as a collaboration between a government agency and a private sector company that can be used to finance, build, and operate projects with the aim to complete, operate within a short time frame and with optimal efficiency. I go quickly by the example of the Murtala Mohammed Airport 2 in Lagos. That project is procured through a partnership between the government, public sector, and the private sector operator. In that instance, what did the government do? The federal government, through the Federal Airport Authority of Nigeria, provided the space. Because you don't have the money. And then they say, okay, look, you private sector, you have the cash, you have the expertise, you have the wherewithal. Bring your money, design the project, come and construct it. And over time, you recover your money. That airport is an example of how the public can partner with the private to procure the projects. And there are rules and regulations guiding these partnerships. The question is, can the partnership be applied in our quest for procuring food security? I go quickly to define food security. To exist when all people at all times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. So, whatever we're talking about in this meeting, in this presentation, in this engagement, we ask ourselves at the end of the day, does it meet that definition? In that case, let me now quickly enter the biblical perspectives of food security with specific consideration of what God Himself did. And we see in Genesis 1, 29 and 30. And God said, behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree, indeed which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for meat. So, in this simple verse, clearly God himself is interested in food security. God himself takes seriously the matter of food security. The question is, how seriously does man take food security? So let's talk about the Nigerian situation. For those of us who have been monitoring or conversant with population advances, with population trends, in the next 25 years, it is reputed to say that Nigeria's population will hit about 400 million. Right? That in itself presents a different kind of challenge. How do you clothe them? How do you school them? How do you feed them? How do you secure them? This is important, especially when we consider the kind of challenges we are facing as a nation. At the level of population of about 230 million people, we see that we're grappling with the challenge of feeding our population. We see the level of insecurity that's characterized our existence. So, what that means is that, given the kind of trend that has characterized our population growth, we are clearly sitting on a keg of gunpowder. So, something happened in the Bible when Pharaoh had a dream. And he found it difficult to have an interpretation of that dream. He had to go call Joseph from the prison, who came to make an interpretation of that dream. And when Joseph came, Joseph stood before him. He stood before Pharaoh and said, look, this is your dream. It means for 7 years there will be prosperity. 7 years there will be surplus of yield, surplus of production. But for the next 7 years there will be famine. At that point, Pharaoh saw that they were sitting on a keg of gunpowder. What did he do? He looked at Joseph and said, for as long as God has revealed this to you, that there is no man as discreet as you in the whole land of Egypt. You take the responsibility of overseeing a planning, a step-by-step implementation of a plan to avert the negative consequence of that quake of gunpowder. What did Joseph come up with? He said, look, who will build storage facilities? Number 1 step. Number 2 step. Who will build storage facilities? Number 2 step. Who will now begin to buy the excess from the production from the farmers, and then we'll store them. And this is exactly the got funding for this. It was implemented. What was the impact? For 14 years, through effective implementation of this plan, we were able to ensure food security for both the surplus years of 7 and the next 7 years of famine. So it is possible that with effective planning, you can ensure continuous supply of food at moderate price of food insecurity by way of famine. The question is, with this kind of lesson, how and to what extent have we applied it as a nation? And I go quickly by the Jonathan administration. The Jonathan government, in my own assessment, seemed to me like they read the Bible. That government existed between 2011 and 2015. What they did first was to establish the Food and Strategic Reserves Department under the Federal Ministry of Agriculture. and rural development. They did. They had some overall objectives: to stabilize food prices, to maintain food reserve, to ensure that there are emergency food supplies, ensure access to nutrition and food, and to introduce the school feeding program. They did. They established these objectives very loud and clear. And in order to begin to take steps to achieve or to realize those objectives, they took steps. The first thing they did was that government started constructing warehouses and silo complexes. Please remember, when Joseph confronted Pharaoh and told him of the impending danger of famine, the first thing he did was to construct the storage facilities. So the Jonathan government took that very first step. They did it. They constructed those warehouses with an overall objective of storing 1.3 million metric tons of food for 6 months. So they had a goal. They had a goal. And next thing they did was they started the process. Should I slow down for? So they went on.
We were alone and they brought it.
Please, one house, please.
So the Jonathan government, apart from building these storage facilities, they went ahead to concession the storage facilities or the silos to private sector. What that meant was that after building, they handed over the ownership from government to private sector. That in itself is a form of public government partnering with private sector to operate, to maintain, to manage the silos. These silos were built different parts of Nigeria. I would, that map seems not to be clear, but I'll present a clearer picture and we'll see where, as a church, we do fitting. So clearly, the Jonathan government did take practical steps to see how they can ensure food security. But that government was cut short. So their food security agenda or objective was never realized. Okay, the question is, what happened under the Buhari government? The Buhari government existed between 2015 and 2023. In their own case, they completed the concession process, which was never completed under the Jonathan government. So what they did was they now signed the agreement, perfected and officially concluded the process of handing over two silos. And remember the famous statement that was made by the president then: we must grow what we eat, and we must eat what we grow. Buhari made that statement. And what did they do with that statement? The Buhari government then encouraged the Central Bank of Nigeria to introduce the CBN Anchor Grower Scheme to encourage smallholder farmers to undertake serious food production, and then brought major off-takers as key stakeholders, brought in the banks, the seed suppliers, the logistic providers, and the input suppliers. That created a whole sort of ecosystem together with the objective of increasing the level of food production in our nation. But what happened? Over 1.1 trillion naira was allocated or was lent out for smallholder farmers under the Anchor Grower Scheme. But unfortunately, no sooner than those loans were given out to those farmers, we began to hear banditry attacks. The farmers were being killed in their farms. What happened? The ones that managed to survive were now sent to IDP camps. So So the monies that were given out to the farmers to farm, the farming was never done, the loans were never repaid, and what happened? After spending about 1.1 trillion naira for loans, advancement to these farmers, only about 600 billion naira was realized. Over 500 billion naira was lost. So when the farmers saw that it was becoming increasingly insecure to go to the farms, some of those monies they got, they started using it to buy dollars. So you had a situation where naira was being converted to dollars. What happened? Naira became depreciated, the level of poverty in our nation increased, we became the poverty capital of the world, and of course so much money was lost to that entire scheme. And again, food security agenda failed. So what happened under the Tinubu government? The Tinubu government came on board, and they too, of course, were confronted with the challenge of providing food, and of course they too came up with their own agenda. The first thing the CBN did was to say, look, this CBN, this anchor growers scheme, I'm not interested in it, so they stopped it. For them, it did not realize its overall objective, so there is no need to continue it. And I think it was around July, the government declared an emergency on food security. And one very important statement that was made was that the entire issue of food security will now be taken under the national security architecture of the nation. So government meant to say that food security is now a national security matter. So the question is, so when you say you declare emergency on food, what do you mean? Well, coincidentally, Ruben Abati knows that I'm involved in this space, and in July 2023 he invited me to arise, to engage on the issue of government declaring emergency on food security and want to pay me. And I remember one of the cardinal contents of that declaration was that government was going to spend so much on procuring different food items. In my interview, I said, look, government should not dissipate energy on so much. Rather, they should select 4 commodities. That was what I said. Rice, maize, soybeans, and wheat. 2 weeks later, Tinubu addressed the nation. Maybe he listened to the interview. Maybe his advisors listened to the interview. And they told him about it. He agreed and selected 4 commodities: rice, maize, soybean, and cassava. So the government decided to embark on serious program for the production of these commodities. Again, the question is, has any of their interventions made any impact? No. The answer is no. So clearly, the way they are going about it is wrong. And it was clear that they were going about it the wrong way. And it was showing, again, there was another issue. And in February 2024, I was invited again when the government said they want to release food to the market from their strategic reserve. And that's when the question Ruben Abati asked me, say, Ken, is it true that the government have this food in their reserves? I looked at Ruben. I said, Ruben, the government say they have something in their reserve. And you want me to come on live TV to come and tell you that they don't have it. I said, okay, look, Ruben, this is how we answer this question. If you have this food truly in the strategic grain reserve, as you release the grains into the market, food prices will go down. So let us wait and see. Clearly, in the forthcoming period, food prices did not go down. As later, I spoke to Ruben about it. Did you observe any food price reduction? Of course, we all agreed that the milk prices went down. Instead, For those of you who remember, government gave 2 billion naira to each state to procure food for as emergency intervention, and food prices went up. I don't know how many of because it was so what they did, instead of bringing down food prices, was rather counterproductive and did not yield the desired result. Again, their agenda or their strategy for bringing about food security has been a failure so far. But what happened recently? Recently, less than a month ago, the Federal Ministry of Agri released a memo that they want to undertake prayers, they want to pray for food security.
Prayer and fasting.
Prayer and fasting. It went viral. And when they saw the backlash, I think they will do that. Apart from that, again, recently, less than 3 weeks ago, the Vice President inaugurated a board, a high-level strategic board for Nutrition 774 initiative. They want to introduce some kind of special nutrition initiative for each of the local governments in Nigeria. Well, again, they have come up with another initiative. Nobody knows how they want to go about it. Nobody knows what the impact will be. For those of you who remember, the Vice President made that inauguration not quite long after what happened in the Northeast about endorsement, whether you are Tinubu or not, for the second time. I think there may be some political undertone to that inauguration. But nevertheless, it is a recent development as a concerning food security agenda for the nation. The third thing that happened again fairly recently, this is less than 2 weeks ago. The president unveiled 2,000 tractors for food production with a target to produce 2 million metric tons of food. This is less than 2 weeks ago. Okay. So the president has spoken. The president has inaugurated. The president has set a target. What then do we do with this development? Now that the president has come to this level, now that we have come to this level where the president has made his remarks, what do we do? How do we work with what the government has brought? And that now leads us to a new model for Nigeria's food security on the basis of a public-private partnership. I want us to pause a bit and look at this. We'll look at this in the context of what Joseph did in the Bible, because that's what they're doing. On the right, we'll see the silos. Those are the silos for storage of food, the kind of thing Joseph built. The first step is that, remember I said the government constructed those silos already in our own case. They've done them. And the government has handed over these silos to private companies. For the fact that we as a church, we are going to get involved, the first step is that we are going to rent those silos from those companies that have acquired those silos. Step one. The second step is that we are going to have our own farmlands to farm the grains. Remember in the case of Joseph, after building those silos, what he did was to partner with those farmers to start buying the excess grains and storing in those silos, in those storage facilities. That's what he did. The next thing is that we're going to bring in mechanization. So, as private sector, the storage, the farm, the mechanization will be the roles for the private sector. Private sector. Then we'll come to the public sector, the government. What will be their own role? The government will bring in the finance. Remember in the case of Joseph, Pharaoh gave him money to be buying those excess supplies. So government will support by way of providing finances. And in this case, the government has provided sufficient finance under the Bank of Agriculture. Recently, the government capitalized that Bank of Agriculture to the tune of 1.5 trillion naira. We are going to access part of that money. The second thing to be done is that the government will provide the guarantee for those loans. And recently, this is less than 1 week ago, the government constituted a board for the National Credit Guarantee Scheme. It just happened 1 week ago. It's a recent development. So clearly, the building blocks, the factors required to make sure that this partnership works, properly implemented, get the desired result, they are already beginning to happen. So we're going to take advantage of these situations to implement the public-private partnership with a view to realizing a strategic food security agenda for Nigeria. But this time around, as a church, our local will get involved. The next thing that will be involved is security. In those locations where the farms are located. For those of you who have been monitoring it, government said, look, we are now going to officially recruit forest rangers, forest guards. It's a recent development. It was not there before. To provide some sort of security for our farmers. Now that government is saying they will do this, it is not something we will consciously, intentionally, and ask them to provide as a way of ensuring that this PPP model works for food security. Of course, the government itself has said, look, food security is part of national security. That is where the DSS comes in. They will provide intelligence. They monitor what is happening. They will tell us as when this want to move come, they know when these people move. They have information. So in this partnership, government's role is clear. The finance, the guarantee, the security in terms of forest rangers, and the intelligence through the DSS. So with the package of public from government using the finance, the guarantee, the rangers, and the DSS, public. Then come to the private, the storage, the farm, the mechanization. A combination of this public and private sector is the new model that will enable us to achieve the overall objective of food security as was done under Joseph. This is clearly what happened under Joseph. So we're just applying what happened in the Bible, and that is what previous governments have never attempted to do. They've never attempted to do. So all their efforts have yielded no result. And the truth of the matter is that the people in government, the people in charge, are actually not thinking. They're not. I've made engagements, I've been engaged with them, and I see that they're not ready to think. So the thing is that it will not be a situation where we're advising them. We will now be the ones to do it. So the question is, in terms of the doing, what should we do as a church? And that's our capture in this case. The President Enugu versus our primates. The primate has just read his Bible. Coincidentally, what we are talking about is in the Bible.
That's right.
So we are online.
We are live.
Let us start, because this is time for that our local. The president said, I want to farm 500,000 hectares of land. That's what I want to do. That's That's what the president has said. He has said. But the truth is that look, they don't talk nothing. So, in engaging with the president, because this matter is the church now, we are going to face the president directly. I'm not going to play middleman. No. So when the president sits before the president, okay, out of this of 500,000, I, the Church of Nigeria, will do 100,000 hectares. The president said, out of my 500,000 hectares of land, I want to produce 2 million metric tons of food. So in response, the president is saying, okay, you want to produce 2 million metric tons of food. Out of my 100,000 hectares of land, I will produce 400,000 metric tons of food. Yes, we can. The president said, look, in all of this program, I want to create so much jobs. And the president is responding, out of this 100,000 hectares of land, by the time I produce 400,000 metric tons of food, I will create 1.3 million jobs. The president said, look, I have made arrangement for 10,000 tractors. Out of these 10,000 tractors, okay, look, since you are going to support you to produce this 400,000 metric tons of food, look, you will allocate 2,000 tractors to the Church of Nigeria. But what does the primate need? In order for primate to do this, the primate will ask for loan. You will give us a loan of 300 billion naira. Out of that 1.5 trillion naira, you give us. Give us, the church. Give us. If you give us this loan, we will hold it for 7 years, the tenor. And it will be an interest rate of 9% per annum. Not more than that. If you give us this money, we can generate 3.5 trillion naira worth of revenue in 7 years. And of course, we will generate revenue to government. We will repay the loan after 7 years. We will contribute to GDP growth. The question then is, now that the primate is going to go before the president to say all this, what is the homework that the primate or the Church of Nigeria needs to do before going to the president? And that takes us to, how do we go about it? I have listed 3 columns. The first set of things to do, the first thing to do is to locate where those silos are located. Those silos, so the first, the ones for blue, all will select, for this phase 1, will select 20 dioceses that will take charge of those silos. Each of those silos will get 8.5 billion naira. Sorry, each of those dioceses, where those silos are located, will get 8.5 billion naira under this phase 1. 20 of those 20 dioceses will participate under phase 1. Then each of the dioceses where the silos are located, they will look for the nearest diocese to them for fund. So the next diocese will provide 5,000 hectares of land in a single location. 5,000 hectares of land in a single location. And each of those dioceses will get 6.5 billion naira. They will do their land clearing, management of the farm, insurance costs, logistics costs. If you add the 130 billion naira for the farmers,
This one house.
if you add the 130 billion naira for the farmers and 170 billion naira for the storage dioceses, you come to 300 billion naira, which is the loan the primate will be asking for. And of course, together with all this, will generate more than 400 billion naira in a single cycle, running 2 cycles per annum over a 7-year period. So much will be generated. Of course, another 20 set of dioceses will be in charge of mechanization. And through under phase 1, we can take up to 80 dioceses for my estimate. How do we start? How do we start? We see in the next slide. Now, please, let's concentrate on the storage facilities. We will see from number 1 to 31 the location of those silos. So the starting point is that as we're here, if your diocese covers any of that location, you are qualified to be in phase 1. The first 20 dioceses that can quickly locate where the silos are, they qualify to be part of phase 1 straight away. Each of those dioceses that have located where the silos are, they will now identify the former dioceses they want to partner with. So I go quickly by the example of, let me take Akure diocese for instance, because one of the silos is located in Akure diocese. Akure bishop can say, okay, I have located this silo in my diocese. The next thing you say, okay, look, diocese of Owo, you can go and look for 5,000 hectares of land in your location, so that we can now begin to partner together. So on the land, you farm, you harvest, you now store in this Akure silo. And with this, from there, the value chain will be expanded and will begin to turn over and create jobs and make the desired impact that will now lead overall to the food security agenda, being that the church is not advising government. Now we are playing a role since they do not know what to do. We have waited for too long, and now it is time to demonstrate clearly that the church can do it. So the next thing to do is right away. You can set up a committee. The church can set up a committee. It's an appeal. The church should set up a 7-man food security committee to quickly begin to coordinate these issues, because we do not need to waste time about this. The factors required to have this thing settled, they are already, coming together for us. To study this committee should now study the entire report, identify the location that will be part of phase 1, both the storage dioceses, the farmer dioceses, and the mechanization dioceses. Identify the land availability for this project. Identify the appropriate ownership of the land. Do a comprehensive report, and it is that report that will be submitted to the primate. And with that document, the primate is ready to lead the church to go and see the president and engage with him on a very serious note on adopting public-private partnership in the quest for food security in Nigeria. Church of Nigeria, our neighbor. On that note, may I respectfully thank the primate for this opportunity, and I do wish our Lord Bishops a successful celebration in this 2025 Episcopal Consultation of the Church of Nigeria. Thank you all, and God bless you.